Hi, this is Susan, and I'm here with Harry, Jason, and Matt, and we're going to talk to you guys about The Unearthly Child, the first Doctor, Dr. William Hartnell, or Doctor Who, played by William Hartnell, and his TARDIS team of Susan, Barbara, and Ian. And we are a new podcast here on YouTube and in social media called Dr. Whoooeeeooo, because we are Whoooeeeooo, and we're excited about this Doctor Who, and we love classic Who, and we love the Target novelizations, and we'd like to compare them to the televised broadcasted shows, and we'd like to take you on a 200,000-year trip today with Unearthly Child. We're going to talk about the 4 parts of Unearthly Child. And we have, I'd like to, first of all, let me introduce my co-host. Harry, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in doing this?
Well, I'm in my 50s. I've been a fan since Doctor Who since the early 80s. Got hooked on the show with Tom Baker, but I got interested in the books. I mean, I've always been a lover of books. And when I found out there were not Doctor Who novelizations, I started picking them up, and eventually I got to the point where now, I have just about all the Doctor Who novelizations from the classic era that are out. I'm just waiting on one more book that's coming out in early next year. I get that. I'll be down to just the 2 Eric Saber Dalek books that need to be coming out, and I'll have everything. I'm a fan of the classic era. I don't mind admitting that. I love the way that the show always ended on the cliffhanger, kept you interested week after week. Just little things like that, to me, it's what made the show so fascinating and so interesting over the years. And to me, the books are as much a part of the classic era as the cliffhanger is as well. So that's where I come in. I'm not afraid to share my knowledge of this show with people.
Wow, thanks, Harry. And why don't you tell your full name?
The full name is Harry Martin Van Hodnes, and I'm in the United States. The book I have right here is 106 novelization of An Unearthly Child. Fills in, not only does it give us what we saw on TV, but also fills in a few things that didn't get mentioned on television that fans who read the book would understand it, but people watching it back then would not have understood it.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Get more to the book, I'll try and explain it for people. No problem.
Okay, great. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this with me, and I'm so glad to have 3 other fellas here. Just say hi and introduce yourself, and let's just go around. Start with Matt.
Hello, my name is Matt. I'm British. I think I'm the only one on this cast who is at the moment. I'm from a place called Coventry, and I've nearly met all the classic people, writers, directors, yeah, name it. I've met them, and I love Doctor Who.
Thanks, Matt. Jason?
Hello, I'm Jason, and I'm from Native Firewolf Channel, also an animator of Doctor Who fan series I do, and not only that, I've seen the classics since I was 12 years old and definitely really enjoyed it. So, yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Hi, Alex. How about you?
Okay, well, I'm from Massachusetts, and I, strangely enough, I actually prefer the classic Who. But I also like Doctor Who in almost all its forms, so.
Thanks. Okay, let's get started. Since this is going to be a comparison contrast, let's start off with the televised unaired pilot the unaired pilot was it showed William Hartnell being a lot more grumpy, and do you guys remember that?
I remember seeing it on DVD. I've got the DVD. And the pilot was so much, in many ways, was different than what we saw on the actual aired television episode. I mean, just the idea of, especially the ending where you've got Hartnell and Susan standing up, Susan looking so different, and Ian and Barbara just out flat on the floor of the TARDIS. That's one of the biggest differences you got with the pilot versus what aired as the first episode.
Okay, Jason?
I think the difference I noticed is the whole TARDIS noise thing. That it was a bit annoying in a way. I just don't remember seeing that in the aired version of the series. But the unaired, I noticed I've seen that because it was a little bit more expanded on the series itself, on this episode. And that's what I mostly noticed there.
Okay, Matt?
When I first saw this, I could tell there was a little bit of a difference in Hartnell's characterization from what was going to be on TV. But you can tell with it would lay the foundation for later Doctors going to be grumpy and that. It just, him being all menacing just seemed not what the Doctor was. I'm just so glad that they aired a few things out when it was going to air. And because you're supposed to have a friendly relationship, not make the audience hide behind the couch in the first opening minutes of the show. But I'm just really glad the team that aired this episode aired all that baggage out and made Hartnell the Doctor that we all knew later on and remember to this day.
Yep. Alex, how about you?
Okay, well, I haven't read the book version in quite a while, but if I remember correctly, the first version, as they covered in the Adventure in Time TV movie, is it was a lot harsher. Hartnell as the first Doctor, as the main character, was a lot harsher. They had a lot more camera angles. I don't know if they took it off of YouTube, but they've had many different times where they've shown it, and it's like different angles, or it'll emphasize more on the TARDIS. And you do have more than one version of Unearthly Child. So I actually did enjoy the version that they stuck with, because I think the first version was it had its own version of special effects, and I know they were rushing to film it and all that because of the equipment and all that. Hartnell was a lot more vicious in the original version, and I think you don't want him to be vicious unless he's confronting the villains. But as I said, this was classic Who. This was November of 1963, which technically we're still in the month of November. So it's been over 52 years. And the show was a lot more history-oriented and all that. But as I said, I did like the way that they settled for the version that they did, and they made the characters a little softer. They didn't do so much special effects and camera angles and stuff. The interlude with Ian and Barbara talking about Susan and then sort of following her, and then the Doctor, or Dr. Foreman, or Doctor Who as he was called, a sort of a sarcastic joke, I guess, or ironic joke, was a lot harsher in the original pilot. As far as the book, I don't remember a lot of the books, especially that one, but I am glad that they settled for a softer version and more on the TARDIS and more on, changing it so they could go into the second and third and the fourth episode where we meet the Daleks for the first time.
Okay, like the thing, thank you, Alex. The thing that I noticed was that there was Susan said that she was from the 49th century, and they had this whole, I don't know, in the pilot they were they were going to blow her up and make her have a specific time frame and a specific planet of origin, which, you know, didn't get worked out really until the midway through Troughton's era and then all the way into Pertwee's era. So I'm glad that they stepped away from that. Anyway, so tell us about the book, Harry.
Terrence Hicks is when it comes to writing Doctor Who books, Terrence Hicks is my personal favorite. More books than anyone else for the series. And as a former script editor, he really knows his way around a story. One of the things that really stands out when he's doing Unearthly Child is a little tidbit that I found here in Chapter 2. But they mention it briefly in the first episode, and Terrence expands upon it, is that the idea of the monetary system. As he puts it, at this time, the early 1960s, Britain was still sticking to her uniquely complicated monetary system. 4 farthings or 2 halfpennies to the penny, 12 pence to the shilling, and 20 shillings to the pound. And Susan had mentioned the fact that she thought they were on the decimal system at this time. And then she mentioned, oh, well, you'll probably change over in a few years, but it was very much of a shock. People back then just didn't realize it, but this was in some ways one of the many times that Doctor Who actually foreshadowed something that was going to happen in the future. And we get into the Tom Baker era. I'll mention that with one story in particular, but the show's always been that way. It's always been something that you never know when, but something's going to come up that will in effect be foreshadowing the future. And that's one of the things that has always been a great thing to me. But as I said, when it comes to the book, Terrence Hicks knows this way. The idea of the decimal system, the filling in of gaps with characters, such as the old woman, Za, and some of the others, giving them a depth of character that you didn't get with the aired time period, with what we had at that time, just 20 to 25 minutes air time. Couldn't get into a full depth of character. But in the books, you can get into that depth of character, and that's paid off a lot because, I mean, it's basically just two-dimensional until you get into the books. Books fill out the characters a lot. I mean, the old woman, Terrence explains why she has this fear of fire, because she thinks that it's because she lost her husband to fighting the monster, and if they didn't have fire, he wouldn't have been lost. So that's why she had the fear of fire. Just little things like that that he fills in the gaps. It gives us a much more in-depth and interesting look at the characters. That's why I love a Terrence Hicks novelization compared to a lot of the other authors.
So, I on to the caveman part of the story. What do you guys think about the next 3 episodes? How did they work together, and what do you think about the you know, how and who is your favorite character and stuff like that? Matt, go ahead, Matt.
It's been a bit of a while since I've watched this. I've only rewatched it the other night, but An Unearthly Child, it works very well because there was no, as Sidney Newman put it, bug-eyed monsters at the beginning, because it was supposed to be all about history, and I love a historical episode and everything. When Doctor Who started, this shows you how much it would advance, and the cavemen, very prehistoric characters. I quite like that they harked back onto that era, like the dawn of time and everything, and it would begin about the Doctor and his friends' journeys, even though he's technically just kidnapped them and just having them at the TARDIS with Susan. But yeah, all these bits in the Caveman, I just enjoyed it. Just to see Hartnell's change from the pilot, which we've already covered, into this explorer going around the universe from probably not his first outing, because Big Finish and a few of the books start covering that, like Quinnis, like with Susan's departure from Gallifrey with the Doctor, or a few others. This one, the start of it, I really enjoy it because it's part of history, and nobody knew if these episodes were going to be very successful. I quite like the woman that Harry was talking about, the one that was afraid of fire, but it was very bland with some of the characters because you didn't get much about their backstories, and I'm now very interested in the books because I'm going to go and read some a bit later, and to hear that woman was afraid of fire for reasons because of her husband, it's quite interesting that you didn't know about it. I don't really have a favourite because it's, you know, the beginning of an era. You don't, but if I'd have to say, it's definitely the TARDIS team and what the Kingsley were working out with the show.
Thanks, Matt. Craig, we've gone. We've talked about the two versions of the opening episode, and now we're into the caveman part. Do you have a recollection of what you enjoyed about the caveman portion of Unearthly Child? Craig? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this serial. I've probably got more to say about episode 1.
Okay, so say it. That's cool.
Okay, to go, yeah? Yeah, it's got, the first episode, it's got one of my favourite one-liners in the entire series when there's Ian and Barbara and they say, oh, it looks like a police box and it travels in time and space. That's like, it's just really iconic for me. And I like the whole concept. I mean, it's just genius that it's an old man, he's there with his granddaughter, she's from the future. It's just genius. And it's very atmospheric as well. I mean, the lighting, the sets, I know they're a bit wobbly, but it was absolutely fantastic, especially for a first series, and very, very moving.
Thank you, Craig.
Rate it now?
Oh no, we're not actually going to do any ratings. We're just gonna talk about it and stuff like that. So let's see. Let's go to Jason. What did you think about the last 3 portions of Unearthly Child?
Well, it was interesting. I know it was like beginning with the doctor out there, with him outside, well, I guess he got captured by the caveman and all that, and with them, there's just debating what's going on, what they're going to do, and they're mentioning about fire when the doctor was starting to focus it already, and the doctor was mentioning, like, he was going to give them fire and stuff, but he realized he didn't have his matches and stuff, and that kept going on, and Ian and Barbara and Susan had to go find him, and then that kept going there, and then later they was captured into, like, in this womb of skulls and stuff, and they was figuring out what to do, and Carl and the Czar and whoever was trying to figure out who should be leader and all that, and it was like mostly about the story, like who should be leader or who should create fire, and yeah, it was definitely an interesting beginning. I mean, definitely an interesting historic moment for Doctor Who, and definitely really enjoyed that one. And the person who created the file, well, if I recall, it would have been Ian. And that's what I'm going to say.
Thanks, Alex. How about you? What did you think of the caveman portion of the show?
Well, yeah, I wasn't overly enthused with it, even though there was there was definitely some interesting dialogue. Again, same thing, just like what Harry said in a way, the books and the TV show can't go into a lot of dialogue because it might slow it down. That being said, it was interesting dialogue. It was interesting, this is the beginning of the era, the beginning of the story and the series, and how it's historical, but then you got the time travel, but then you have the conflict that he's really not supposed to be helping them advance, but he has to because they don't want to be trapped or kidnapped or whatever. So you have the interesting play between the Doctor and Ian Chesterton, which he keeps mispronouncing, and then you have the interplay between the Doctor and his granddaughter Susan, and then you have the interplay between Ian and Barbara. And that was the other interesting thing about the era as well, is that not only did they have the lack of budget for the wobbly sets and they're trying to do special effects and trying to come up with monsters and all that, but you also have the interplay within 10 or 15 minutes of not only the creatures, but whoever villain they're fighting against, but the interplay between technically the four of them when it's basically two, going back and forth. So in that sense, also the classic era I thought was better in the sense that once you got into the show, once you were paying attention, you could see all this interplay between the characters, and I don't know if the new revival show is really working on that in terms of the interplay between the characters and the villains and all that. But that being said, the caveman part was not the thing that drew me in. It was the interplay between the four characters and the situations that they got into in the beginning of the era.
Cool, thanks. The one thing that I really I loved about the caveman portion of the show was Susan in the Cave of Skulls with a skull on a stick on a torch. That was on fire. I mean, that was one of the coolest, like, super funny, super eerie. I can imagine kids being like, "Oh, she's got a skull." I mean, not anymore, but yeah, back in that day, kids would have been like, "What is she doing with the skull and the stick on fire on that torch?" It's just what a fun thing. Anyway, I love the politics between the leadership of the tribe, and and I loved how rich and involved the story was, even though it was prehistoric. It was a historical story set in some place that was prehistory, pre-written anything down. So, I mean, all of this was very imaginative, really quite imaginative. And so what did Terrence Dicks say about the last three portions of Unearthly Child, Harry?
Well, Terrence did a bang-up job on the last three chapters, the last three parts of the story. Kept it flowing well, filled in some gaps. He did a superb, as far as I'm concerned, he did a superb job. Then I had to admit, I am slightly biased because when it comes to Terrence Dicks, he's done more books than anyone else in the series. And as far as I'm concerned, if you want to get into the series with the books, just pick up a Terrence Dicks novelization. You cannot go wrong because the man, being a former script editor, if anybody can write, can take what was done on the screen and put it to print it is turn 6. I mean, the man, there have been many other authors who've done books, but turn 6, as far as I'm concerned, he is the #1 author for the show. All the way from where the first episode left off, where they took off in time, all the way to where they left the TARDIS. They're starting to explore the planet. As they leave, the radiation counter kicks in, and it starts going into the danger zone, and you see, next time, the dead planet. And it just works out so smoothly. Can't go wrong with turn, as I said many times, you just can't go wrong with turn 6 doing an adaptation with a story from the show. You just can't.
Okay, well that leads us into next week's or the next time we gather. We might be doing more than one of these a week because there's 157 adventures that we want to talk about. So we're going to talk about once that radiation thing kicks over into the danger area and they walk off into the capital city of the Daleks on Skaro. And so thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, and you're free to do whatever, leave comments or whatever. And thanks to all my podcasters. Thank you, Harry, for being willing to go through this whole thing with me.
My pleasure, Susan. Hey, I'm happy to do it. It's a book lover. The way I look at it is, get people interested in the books. That way they'll start seeking an understanding of stuff that was going on the screen and such. Gives them a little bit more something to listen and read to. Encourage them.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the way I look at it.
Yep. And thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
I'll say before I forget, happy 53rd birthday to Doctor Who, and
Woo-hoo.
thanks very much for the team that worked on this to get us to this moment.
Yeah, all hail Verity Lambert and Sidney Newman. And all
Well,
hail,
this is-
and all
it's
hail
good-
Stephen
It's
Moffat.
good to see Harry back as well. With all Harry's book knowledge, it's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Hey, I'm willing to give Verity and all those who worked in the old days all the credit, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have anything today.
That's right. All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time on Dr. Whoooeeooo.